An extraordinary further escalation in the Middle East war, with Israel bombing Hamas leaders in their faraway Qatar homes, an act Qatar has described as cowardly and a clear breach of international law, but which Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says was a targeted strike against Hamas's terrorist chieftains. It seems they were part of the negotiating team. Given that the US has a huge air base not very far away and yet seems to have given the green light for the attack, there are lots of questions to answer here. Lord Peter Ricketts, the former UK National Security Advisor, joins me now. Let's try and get some answers. Lord Ricketts, thank you very much for this. First of all, Qatar says this is a clear breach of international law. Are they right?
I'm not a lawyer, Andrew, and you're not, but I was taught in my Foreign Office career that states do have a right of self-defense, but it is very hedged about in international law with conditions about proportionality and imminence, and Israel would have to produce the evidence that they thought this group were presenting an imminent threat to the state of Israel. So it's arguable, no doubt, in international law. The diplomatic consequences, I think, are very clear.
It was targeted, clearly, and relatively narrowly so, and it was in response to the murder of Israeli citizens yesterday. So that's clear. But it also suggests, given this is the negotiating team, that Israel has given up on any chance of negotiating with Hamas. All of that is over.
I think it's a pretty good rule of thumb in diplomacy that if you attack and try to kill the other side's negotiating team, you are not interested in a negotiated solution.
Yes.
And I think it is now clear, it's been clear for some time, I think, that Netanyahu doesn't want to negotiate a ceasefire with Hamas. He is looking for total victory, whatever that means, total military control of Gaza. But I think it's a huge question, and perhaps Keir Starmer will put this to President Herzog of Israel tomorrow. What is the strategy now? Is it indeed to occupy, annex Gaza from here on in, to break the morale of the people of Gaza and drive them into expulsion, to going to other countries? Or is there still a route to a negotiated solution? I think tonight, I must say, it looks even more unlikely than it was before.
But indeed, Keir Starmer has condemned what's happened. What about the role of America, though? Because clearly they did know in advance. They've said that in the White House, and therefore they gave some kind of permission for this. And yet they themselves have an air base not very far away. So what do you think the thinking in the Trump administration might be about this?
Well, I think in terms of the Americans, we don't know whether they were informed 5 minutes before the attack or consulted in any way. Of course, the Israelis had to inform them. If they'd flown their aircraft towards the big American airbase, they could well have been shot down by US air defenses. So informing them, deconflicting, as the military would say at the last moment, clearly that was essential. Whether that left the White House time to have stopped it, I don't know. But yes, I mean, the implication is that the White House at least acquiesced, accepted that Netanyahu was going to do this. We'll see how much backing Trump himself gives him, bearing in mind that Qatar has been a good ally of the US. And Trump, I think, has appreciated that. The Americans indeed have been in direct negotiations with the Hamas people there. So certainly it creates all sorts of issues for the Americans. But behind it all is, what does this mean about Israeli strategy? And I hope that the Americans will be interested in that as well.
Let's hope so. Lord Ricketts, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Can I ask you about one much more serious issue, really, which is the Doha strike, the strike by the Israelis on Qatar, Hamas people in Qatar. Now, we know that there was some kind of communication between Netanyahu and the White House before this happened, but have we any indication as to whether the Israeli government was just simply informing the Americans or was asking permission?
Look, I think we'll hear a lot more in the upcoming White House briefing, but the word from the White House is that the United States was notified ahead of time by the Israeli government about the strike, which, of course, the Americans will argue is not the same as the United States approving or giving the green light for this strike. But it's causing serious difficulty for the Trump administration in terms of its relationship with the Qataris, a relationship that Donald Trump has up until now really very carefully guarded ever since the signing of the Abraham Accords during his first term in government. The Qataris and a host of other governments across the Middle East region absolutely outraged by this Israeli strike on Doha. And I think it's going to leave Donald Trump with some serious long-lasting repercussions as well as immediate questions to answer.